Welcome to How I Raised It, the podcast that goes behind the scenes with entrepreneurs who've raised capital. We uncover the tips, tricks, and techniques they use to get investors to write a check. Strap in and turn it up.
Hello, and welcome to How I Raised It, the podcast where we interview founders who have successfully raised capital. So today's guest is Dan Meader of Allowance Manager. Hello, Dan.
Hello, Nathan. It's nice to be here.
Glad to have you. So let's jump into it. Tell me about Allowance Manager. What do you do? What is it? And why did you start this business?
Allowance Manager is a national bank for kids. Effectively, it came into being because I had told my kids that I was going to give them an allowance because my philosophy on learning skills is that they're best developed through early, frequent, firsthand experience. And money is no different. Understanding money is a skill in my mind. And so I thought, well, I'll give you guys some money so that you can start developing this skill. And then, of course, it turns out 70% of the country and actually the world decides to try to do this. And I, like those people, I'm busy and and the dollar values are small. So I would always prioritize following through on that promise. I'd prioritize it very low on the list. So I was really, really bad at following through on it. And my kids came to me and said, you're really bad at this. Why don't you automate it? Because you have a technical background, which I do. I worked in the Valley for a while. And so we automated it and it solved the problem. That's effectively what Allowance Manager is. To expand on that just a little bit, it started as a cash ledger simply to keep track of how much I owed the kids, my commitment or my liability to them. It would automatically post a $7 entry to their account every week because I said I'd give them $1 a day. Uh-huh. And then we could always answer the question, the ever-present question, how much allowance do you have? And then I could take my phone out of my pocket and debit their account if I bought something on their behalf, or I could give them more. I could credit their account if they washed the car or mowed the lawn or what have you. And then because it solved that problem for us, it really solved the problem. Sometimes when you apply technology to, you develop a technological solution to some problem that you have, you either shift the burden to now managing the technology, which is no solution, or you just create more, friction, more problems. So you end up throwing the supposed or the would-be solution out the window. In this case, it did actually solve the problem, and so we decided to share it. We named it Allowance Manager. We prettied it up a little bit and shared it, and then a bunch of people signed up, and then a lot of those people asked us to actually be able to make the money real. That is, and what they meant by that was, can I give my kid actual autonomy and authority and independence, basically, to transact at real world points of sale, and can I blast real money, through the American and global financial system to their pockets, so that they can buy a Jamba Juice or a game at GameStop or pay for their own iTunes account or whatever it is.
Sure.
And so we said, yeah, that's pretty cool, and we integrated a real money component to Allowance Manager that makes it pretty danged awesome, actually. So that's what Allowance Manager is. It really allows. It's a kids' national bank, real money. It keeps the parents honest and keeps us. It allows us parents and us families to really impart, do what we want to do, which is impart this skill, this vital life skill to our kids.
Gotcha.
Sorry, it's a long-winded answer.
No, it's interesting. I get it. I have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, and the 7-year-old is started collecting allowance, and I get that scenario that you just used where we'll be out somewhere at a store and she wants something, but she doesn't have her money with her, and she wants me to buy it for her, but then collecting that is hard later. So
absolutely,
I totally get it. Awesome. So how much have you raised for this company so far?
We have raised $2 million about $2,300,000 so far. Okay. We're raising a very small round right now that is in process. We're raising $500,000. We have 300 of it circled up. Nice. We're actually using Founder Suite to do that, which is very helpful. Thank you. And prior to this round, we raised $2 million.
Okay. Healthy. Is that venture money, angels, friends and family? What's the combo?
It's all friends and family. I think some of these folks, they cross the border into angel land. I mean, it's fairly vague sometimes when people sort of can call themselves angels, or we assign those monikers to folks. It's not, there's no formal real well, there are formal groups that angels can join and be, go through formal processes and so forth. But these are all individuals. We raised this all from individuals. We have a philosophy here that we'd like to have some real. We'd like to be at a real decision point when we decide to go for venture capital. We want to know that we've de-risked the investment as much as possible, and we want to give the high risk reward stuff to the early stage folks, and we also want to have the patience of friends and family, if you will. I don't like or I wonder whether I like the odds of being like one of 20 horses that's being ridden as hard as possible and forced to pivot and being sort of chucked by the wayside, knowing that another one of the portfolio companies is really the one that now looks like it's going to deliver the returns, so no one else really matters.
Yeah, I think that's a valid concern. I mean, that's how the venture model works. Is 2 out of the 10 are going to generate all the returns, and so the VCs often kind of focus on those 2 companies and ignore or give passing duty to the other
Yes, and I don't mean that I don't mean to disparage VCs. I totally understand the motivation. I completely get the I would behave the same way. I get why they do that. I just don't know that at any given time. I don't like the odds of being the winning necessarily the one that's in the lead. Reminds me of that little carnival thing where you're spraying water into the mouth of a clown and the balloon is inflating, and you're trying to burst the balloon first.
That's a great metaphor for venture capital. I like that. Yes, I know exactly. So how many let's call them angels or call them investors. How many investors do you have, and how did you build the list? How did you target these folks?
Yeah, that's a great question for us. It's very interesting. I mean, it's a very apt name. To call this group friends and family. It's really just folks who are in my direct social circle. They're a couple of them are second degree connections, but most of them are first degree connections, and there are more than one. There's more than one handful and fewer than 2 handfuls of investors in that $2 million round. So it's maybe 7 investors. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact figures, but it's about 7 people who've contributed to that. And thankfully, throughout my career, I was lucky to have worked in the Valley for a while, and I spent 10 years at Apple, and I have some connections who are still there at Apple, and some other folks who've been very successful up in the Bay Area. And there are a couple of great things about finding supporters in the Bay Area. One is that people have made more money than they ever thought that they would in some cases. And not in every case. I mean, I don't want to generalize about the Bay Area to say that everybody there is flush with cash, but there's also an attitude. There's also a sort of an attitude that things can happen. You can think different, if you will, and end up making a difference in the world, and be rewarded with the kudos and the sort of the bragging rights for having done so, and the financial sometimes and frequently a financial return and reward as well.
Yeah.
So it's easier to find a guy who's in the Valley or a gal who's in the Valley who's like-minded and willing to take that risk, having seen it done there before, than it is to find somebody out of an environment that's not like that to really
Sure.
get comfortable with it. So
So your handful of these investors. I mean, this is a pretty classic, friends and family raise. What was your approach to them? Did you just or let's put this in two ways. What sort of traction, if you had any, did you have when you went out to raise friends and family money? And what was your approach? Did you circulate an executive summary? Did you, put together a demo and take it around to your friends? Or were you literally just calling up your friends for coffee and hitting them up for a check?
Yes. Well, let's see. One thing that occurs to me, I had written, like I mentioned earlier, but my kids knew that I had a technical background. I started in the business as an engineer, a software engineer. Actually, I have an economics degree from Berkeley, but I got into software engineering and ultimately worked as a software engineer for Apple and like I said, and so we had put together. I was able to cobble together the first version of this thing for our family and then share it, and that was what I was able to point to when I met with these folks. When I described what we were doing, I was able to show them the product. I was able to show them the traction. I was able to show them what was, what we were accumulating on the back end. One of the things that's interesting, and one of the is that we have this interesting visibility into youth consumer behavior. So we were able to look into the database and say, gosh, this kid, he cleaned his room and he earned so much money for doing that, and then he bought or she bought a rainbow loom, let's just say something like that, or he bought a video game. Not to be sexist and apply those things to genders, but that was kind of fun and interesting. And so the conversations, we were able to show some traction. We like I said, we also had some tens of thousands of people sign up. We were fortunate in doing that, and we in the early stages, and so we were able to point to that as well, and pretend that we could extrapolate to infinity off of that, perhaps.
Sure.
Imagine that was a sustainable curve. So it really amounted to having those conversations, sort of throwing out a suggestion or having cocktail party conversation about what we were doing, and engaging and continuing that conversation with folks who seemed interested in it, and then ultimately saying, hey, we're raising money to be able to take this to the next level, because it's certainly an expensive endeavor to do what we've done with respect to working within the highly regulated highly regulated financial services space. And one thing I want to make sure that I mention in this answer is that that occurred to me when you were asking the question, is that it's really interesting to me how binary the exercise was for me. The people who wrote big checks, the people who were really into it, they simply got the idea. And I don't want to paint a rosier picture than we had. We didn't have a ton of traction. We didn't really have a lot to go on. A lot of these people did invest just on the idea and a basic proof of concept and some traction.
And your relationship. I mean, you had pretty established relationships with these folks, right?
And my relationship with the investors, with the would-be investors, or the ultimate investors. But what's interesting is that the folks who wrote the big checks and have continued to support us, they simply got the idea right out of the gate. It wasn't a sales job. It felt more like the conversation was more like this: hey, I get what you're doing. I'd like to be involved. Here's some financial support to do that. And I have other people who I'm certain, or who I've felt certain I could get over the hump. And I have worked to convince those people to be participants in this, until I'm basically blue in the face, and they hem and they haw, and they, some have seemingly reluctantly jumped on board. I want to point out to other people who are raising money that my experience is that there are those people who will just say, and you have to kiss a lot of frogs or overturn a lot of stones or whatever, but they just say, yeah, I get it. Here's a big check, and let's see if this works out.
Yeah. Any sense on how many people you talk to end up with 7 or 10 or whatever the number is? What's the top of the funnel look like?
Yeah, the top of the funnel. Well, this isn't going to sound weird to anybody who's like an entrepreneur, I don't think. But my life is allowance manager. It's pretty weird. It's just like, so everybody I talk to is a potential candidate, and I'm constantly talking about it. So it's hundreds of people that I've sort of introduced to the concept.
Yeah.
Or it was at that point, and it's many thousands at this point, probably. Well, I don't know. That implies I get around more than I do, but it's certainly in the hundreds, and then it boils down quickly to, the funnel gets very narrow very fast, and so, but I must say it's hundreds.
Yeah.
Anybody I've met along the way, cocktail parties and so on,
has got the pitch. Gotcha.
Yeah. And I'm sort of boring now. I mean, like everybody, if somebody introduces me to somebody else, they're like, well, this is Dan Meader. He's allowance manager. And then there's which is helpful in one regard, but it's also makes me sort of one-dimensional.
Better that than to be ignored or forgotten, right?
I think that's true. Yeah.
So I don't know if you have anything you can share here, and feel free to skip this question, but actually, the folks that were interested, intrigued, the binary, how did you actually ask for the check, or did they just say, put me down when you're rounding up the checks? I think and the reason I'm asking this is I think when raising from friends and family, it's awkward sometimes to go for the close. If you're raising from angels or strangers or venture capitalists, it's easier to kind of have an efficient process and go for the close. When you're raising from friends and family, how do you go for the close?
Well, that's a very interesting question, especially in the context of what I do. I mean, one of the things that allowance manager.
Actually, let me ask one additional bit of that. Was it a rolling round, or did you have a catalyst to get all these friends and family that were interested to come in? Did you have any catalyst?
Yeah, no, I definitely did not have a catalyst. It was a rolling round, and the way we handled that was simply with convertible notes. At the time, the safes didn't even exist a few years ago, or they were not popular. I was unaware of them, and so we used convertible notes, and we said this is going to be a rolling close, and it was, and we were fine with that. Everybody was fine with that. With respect to asking people for the close, or affecting the close, it's very interesting. One of the premises that Allowance Manager is sort of based upon is that we would never consider depriving our kids of being read to, let's say, reading to them when they're 4 or 5 years old, right? And giving them books so that they can start to learn to read. But for some reason, we think we're doing them a favor by sheltering them from money. And it's a very interesting cultural thing. It's very taboo. And I think that's, you're kind of getting into that. The question sort of implies that there's this taboo to asking for money. And because culturally there really is. It's an awkward thing for for many reasons. But partially because of what Allowance Manager is meant to do, which is to sort of dash that barrier or dash that taboo. I was able to sort of broach the topic, but also I've had to train myself. I mean, I was raised in a culture that just really, didn't allow for talking about money, especially with friends and family, asking other people for money. It was, don't borrow from people, don't lend to people, don't talk about how much money or how little money you have. It's just a vulgar topic, if you will. So, I just had to train myself to overcome that, and it's a little bit like anything in life, where if I offended somebody, I'd try to I'd try to recognize that, and I would try to back off then and just say, hey, I'm sorry, I'm an entrepreneur. This is part of my gig.
I like that. I like that answer. Actually, I'm an entrepreneur. This is part of my job. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. I just have to, and I'm sorry that I offended. I'll try not to cross that line again. But I want to, and I always say, but I want to take you along. I know that it may require some storytelling, and it may require a leap of faith. But you could help me by writing a check, and hopefully I can help you by returning a bigger check. And
that's a good answer there too. That's quotable. I like that.
Oh, good. But, yeah, I've been doing it a long time. So I've said a lot of things over the years, but it was a rolling close, and it's just basically mustering up the courage like I did when I was, I don't know, 11 or 12, and I picked up the rotary phone and I called the girlfriend that I had, quote unquote, asked out that day, and I said I have to call her on the phone, and man, that took a lot of courage. And I got her on the phone and I said, hey, well, now that we're going out, do you want to go bowling, or do you want to go to the movies or something like that? And she said to me, Dan, just because we're going out doesn't mean we have to go out. But anyway, that's irrelevant to the running money raising conversation, other than to say sometimes you misunderstand, and sometimes you get a lot of times you get the stiff arm, and I ultimately did go on dates with other people, and so it was a happy end. So fundraising could be the same way.
Well, and making the call, that's just getting up the gumption to make the call. With this current I don't know if you call it a round, but this current round you're raising, are you doing anything differently, or is it kind of an extension of what you've been doing?
This is an extension of what we've been doing. I think that this will. We've gone through a period recently where we've been sort of in the doldrums. We've been reinventing our. Not reinventing. We've just been firming up our back end partners, and we've had to take a number of months. Closer to a year, better portion of a year, to really take what we had proven about a year ago and use that to develop new and more powerful, truly best-in-class partnerships. And now we're going to be coming out of the gate very, very strong, using the same strategies that we were doing as we went into this reinvention or this upgrade. And what we think we'll be able to do, what we're doing is we're raising from friends and family on the same strategy now, but we think we'll have very strong metrics that will, as I indicated before, be a lot less risky for people who come in and either we'll be self-sufficient, we'll be so strong that we'll be self-sufficient, and we'll have the luxury of being able to make a decision at a point in the near future of whether to raise money or not, or we'll have we'll have the ability to say to somebody, look, this is a fairly mature and relatively de-risked investment, and we'd like you to lead it, and we'd like to, therefore give up less of the company than we otherwise would have. So,
I was going to ask that too. With your early friends and family investors, did you have to offer, special terms, a deeper discount on the note? Did you get into kind of gamifying that? Come in early, you get X% off, anything like that?
We didn't, and I've been reluctant to structure different terms. I mean, I'm not averse to it, and I know that people, and I'm not immune to it either. I like to try to structure things so that they're consistent and easily understood, and therefore, sort of down the road, they don't get really complicated and difficult to untangle.
Yeah.
No is the answer to the question. I didn't have to, but again, I'm not immune to it, and I can see for sure why somebody would be tempted to do that. And if you have to do that, I suppose it's, you do what you have to do.
Yeah.
But no, I was pretty successful at just saying, here are the terms. I mean, there were specific terms. We did give a liquidation preference. We did sell, the round that we raised that we convert the convertible note converted into a preferred class of equity that has a single liquidation one-time liquidation preference, meaning everybody will get their money back in the preferred category before any of the common holders get paid out. And we also offered a priority return, a decent priority return that was meant to give people solace relative to the opportunity cost that they might have been seeing. So, but we figured we will easily outstrip, if we're successful, we'll easily outstrip a normal return. And so even if we give a couple of extra points on what you would have had, or what we think you would have had in the regular marketplace, or that it will be fine. It will be a non-issue. Yeah. So those are the terms that we offered in our first round.
Excellent. Let's just I've got one more question. What piece of advice would you give yourself if you were starting this process all over again? Something you wish you knew, or just advice to other founders raising?
Oh man, it's going to sound cliche. I mean, the best advice that I can give is start early and never. Well, perseverance is the name of the game in this entrepreneurship thing. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you just keep going until the fire lights. I'm a fan of real wood burning fireplaces, and sometimes I get the fire to light quickly, and sometimes I don't. And but I know that I'm going to get the fire to light, and I keep at it until I do. And, in those cases where it's not lighting quickly, and so perseverance is the name of the game. That's really super cliche, but it's easier, and it's way easier said than done, and that's why I say it. There will be some black times, right? So, but the advice that I would give on fundraising really is that when you get a small win, it really feels easy to, especially if it's a rolling close. It really feels easy to, and because the demands on your time are so great, and you're wearing 5, 6, 7, 10 hats. And because raising money and talking about money and especially from friends and family is taboo. It's a very uncomfortable thing, and there are things that you're probably more comfortable doing, like making the product and selling the product, and so which you should focus on too. But one of the things that I think I might have benefited from in talking to my now sage self is don't take your foot off the accelerator. When you've got some momentum, use that to your advantage, and really keep at that. Don't take that hat out, or don't take that hat out of the rotation, the fundraising hat out of the rotation, unless you've been successful at raising what you think is some milestone round that and then you can go off and do what you said you were going to do with it. But in our case, we actually had it sort of was a perpetual rolling close. Yeah. We've been raising money as needed as we've gone along. So I think that's probably what I'd say to myself.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's I agree with that. You once you start, it's so hard to get that momentum going. Once you finally get it going, like the fire lit, you got to kind of build on that until the round is done. So I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Dan. For anyone interested, it's just allowancemanager.com, or is there a different URL?
It's allowancemanager.com. It's Allowance Manager in both in Google, in the your favorite Android app store. Actually, Google Play, I think, is the only place we distribute it right now, and iTunes. So Allowance Manager in both of those places. If you want to invest in Allowance Manager, hit me up at danmeader@allowancemanager.com. I know we can't solicit, so maybe that's not a legitimate thing to do. But hit me up through
learning more. Yes, good.
Yeah, interested in learning more. Come through AngelList, and we'll go that way.
Very good. All right, thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. This has been another episode of How I Raised It.
Nathan, thank you very much. Good to talk to you.
You too.